Before there was G-Man, there was G-Man, and I don't think they're all related. There was Jetpack, and he looks a bit like G-Man. This G-Man, not that G-Man. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is G-Man, it's a bit like Jetpack, but it's not like it. As introductions go, that's not a great one, but I tell you what is a great introduction. This music. G-Man was one of Codemasters' 80s classics and created by Peter Williamson, James Wilson and David Whittaker on the music. Three names who had such a good, varied career in the Spectrum's life, it could pretty much double the runtime of this video if I sat here and read them all out. So I'm only going to mention three completely random games, one from each of them. Pub Trivia, Super Robin Hood and Advanced Pinball Simulator. How's that for varied? Now, so far, I've called the game G-Man, because quite clearly that's what it was supposed to be called, but this is Codemasters, and if anyone knows how to upsell a game, it's the darlings. Slap the word Super on that cover, and you've got yourselves a hit, boys. Note that the game never calls itself Super G-Man anywhere, it's just on the box art. They were absolute terrors for this kind of nonsense. Regardless, it was Codemasters, and if it was Codemasters and it was a budget title, you can guarantee I owned it as a kid. And owned it as a kid I did, for this was Codemasters and it was a budget title. However, because children are stupid and like to put two and two together to make square, I was absolutely convinced that G-Man, or Super G-Man if you want to give him his Sunday dinner name, was a direct sequel to Jetpack. Yes, I know Codemasters didn't make Jetpack. Yes, I know Lunar Jetman would have been the most obvious comparison point, seeing as that was technically the sequel to Jetpack in the first place, but I didn't own that. For reasons only children would ever understand, in my headcanon, Lunar Jetman didn't exist, and Super G-Man was the weird sequel no one asked for. So what is this game exactly? Well, your G-Man, you may remember him from the game Jetpack, but not from Half-Life 2. Stop getting those two mixed up. Your goal is to travel across a planet to reach your spaceship and head back home. In order to do this, you utilize a handful of controls: speed up, slow down, jetpack, and shoot. The game is all about getting to grips with the heavy momentum of G-Man himself. Using your jetpack can often feel like you're trying to punch a balloon through a pit of treacle, and most of your deaths will come from either jetpacking too much or too little. It's especially difficult when trying to line yourself up with an enemy that's headed your way, especially if you're also trying to avoid crashing headfirst into the landscape. To continue on your quest, you're given 3 lives with the chance to gain an extra life at the end of each stage, and you'll need to maintain your fuel and ammo supply by picking up the appropriate pods as you travel along. That's pretty much all there is to G-Man, a continual forward pace and balancing fuel reserves and shooting weird monstrosities when you simply can't avoid them. There are, however, these teleporters that you can come across. The manual specifically states, teleport chambers can be a risky shortcut, but I have absolutely no idea what it's on about. Teleporters are clearly the best option in every single situation. I avoided a few of them to see if I could work out what it was talking about, but they all let you skip massive chunks of the level, so I call absolute bollocks on the manual. Teleporters are great and you should always get in them. There is no risk. Shut up, manual, you know nothing. Now, with this being a game I have a lot of nostalgia for, I wanted to check out some of the reviews at the time. Even replaying the game now, while it's a simple affair and it doesn't exactly look like the world's most exciting Jetpack sequel, I still had fun with it. Outside some annoying instances where losing a life is practically impossible to avoid, that is, I could actually feel myself getting to grips with the gravity mechanics, and I was getting further than I'd ever managed to get as a child. Christ, who knows, I might even be able to complete the game before I finish writing this review. Anyway, going back to those reviews, it certainly received a mixed reception. Crash Magazine gave the game an underwhelming 43% overall, and their 3-man team of reviewers were all over the shop when it came to opinions. Taking 2 of them as an example, Mike said, Super G-Man looks like a failed O-level computer studies project. The graphics are awful and the scrolling is jerky, messy and unattractive. And though the sound is better than you'd get from a 15-year-old school person, it's way below the standard I'd expect from a pro. This isn't worth a fraction of the price. And all I can say is, come on, Mike, it was £2. Probably a little overzealous with the vitriol there. This bilious anger is followed up by the next reviewer, Nick, who states, Super G-Man is one of the best games Codemasters have ever produced. And I can pretty much just stop reading it there because, wow, Mike may have been a bit harsh on the game, but Nick, come on Nick, it's alright, but it probably wouldn't have been one of the best Codemasters games produced that year, you lunatic. So, Crash Magazine were completely mental, but Your Sinclair weren't much better. Giving the game an overall score of 5 out of 10, the review signs off with, what it boils down to is a cross between Scramble and Jetpack, with a touch of Lunar Lander thrown in for free. It's slow, it's graphically uninteresting, it's old-fashioned, but what the heck, it's also addictive. It's one of those games you keep on saying you'll stop after this go, but somehow you never quite get around to switching it off and loading up something else. Which feels like a very odd argument. A game can only really be addictive if it's at the very least something worth playing, no? People don't look at Tetris and say, well, I mean, I've been playing it for the past 20 years non-stop because it's incredibly addictive, but the graphics are all just blocks. 5 out of 10. None of these guys really seem to be able to properly nail down what it is they don't like about G-Man outside the fact that it is admittedly functional on the eye. Finally, we had Sinclair User, who stated, the action is not as fast as it could have been, but I suppose this way it lends itself to more players. Not very difficult after you've played it for a bit, but great fun. Which is fine, but they do go on to give it an 8 out of 10, which, in my heart of hearts, I know that's too high. So what it boils down to is this. G-Man isn't a fantastic game, but it's also not an awful game. While it's basic to look at, it also manages to mix up its art styles as you get further and further through the game. While it's not overly difficult, it also manages to be unfairly harsh at times. While the gameplay is simple, there's a level of skill that has to be grappled with in order to get further into its levels. It's a game where, for every bad word, there's an opposing good word. It's a middling game that ever so carefully manages to nudge itself into the realms of playable, addictive, and decently fun. It's not a must-play by any stretch, but once you do start playing it, there is an almost intangible whisper in your ear that you should, in fact, continue playing. Because maybe this time you'll finally get through to the end. This is, after all, the furthest I've ever got. Around 3 or 4 stages in, I've mastered the art of gravitational pull, I'm conserving my fuel for when it's really necessary, I've got enough ammo for when it's really needed, and I'm utilising every single teleporter I can get my hands on because I know for a fact that there is absolutely no risk involved at all with bollocks.